over in fine detail exactly what Eagleberger was told. They've got a map in there, and they're tracing all of this. And I'm sure President Bush, although he's not in there now, we're not quite sure where he is. He was in the residential part of the White House a little bit earlier. We went back to try to find out exactly what President Bush has said on the record as to what would happen if the Israelis were attacked by the Iraqis. He was asked this on December 18th, almost exactly 1 month ago. The president said at that time, he said, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this, but I have talked to our coalition partners. By that, of course, he meant the Arab partners. He said the coalition will not fall apart if indeed Saddam Hussein attacks Israel. And Israel, what he didn't say, of course, would Israel respond? And of course, that's what we're all waiting to hear, Tom.
All right, John Cochran, we want to go back to Israel now, to NBC's Martin Fletcher, who has been able to remove his gas mask. It's been on again, off again, and then on again, now off again. I think I got the sequence right there. At any rate, he has talked to his family. And Martin, what happened at your home tonight? Martin Fletcher, are you there? Well, maybe we've lost the telephone connection. We'll go back to that as swiftly as we can. We have NBC's Gary Sick. He doesn't actually belong to us, but he's been working with us this week, and we think of him as a member of this family. He's an expert on the Middle East, and he is an expert on the very complicated relationship between Israel and the Arab world, and the overlay now of the United States and this military operation there. What's your best guess on what the Israelis will do?
Well, first of all, if they don't know where Bush is right now, my guess would be that he's talking with Shamir, because they have got to be comparing notes right now. And it seems to me it depends on, one, how much damage was done, as you just said a few minutes ago, but two, I think it depends on what we're doing. And I suspect that Bush is telling him right now, this is what we've got on the way, this is what we intend to do about it, this is how we intend to protect you from here on. And I should suspect that he would be trying to persuade Shamir to hold off.
They don't have the greatest personal relationship in the world.
No, they do not, but they both have the same thing at stake. Shamir wants to see this thing succeed every bit as much as George Bush does. The Israelis felt that they were being protected very well. They were very pleased with what appeared to be a victorious attack yesterday, and I think they were willing to ride along with and take advantage of that. Losing my...
You have to put your ear back in so that you can hear not just yourself but others as well.
More modern technology.
That's right.
My ear is the wrong shape for modern technology.
All right. But you've been in those crisis situations in the White House right now. How much control does the NSC and the President of the United States have over events? Isn't the grave danger at the moment that events will begin to control them?
That's always been the problem. And in fact, the thing that was really amazing about the first 24 hours of this was that everything went according to plan. Nothing ever goes according to plan. That is unheard of. And you expect things to go wrong, you expect things to get out of control. This is the first real shock that we've had, and it's odd that it comes 24 hours late, that it took that long for Saddam Hussein to come up with one of his bag of tricks. The Israelis in the past have always been very careful to say they would respond at a time and place of their own choosing. And I would be very surprised to see a missile going off in the next 15 minutes.
Wouldn't you think that the next thing we'll hear from Saddam Hussein will be Baghdad radio saying that we acted in self-defense, the infidel Zionists in the Israeli world attacked us and we were forced to respond?
Yes, absolutely. And he knows what he's doing, and we know what he's doing too. I mean, he's trying to split the coalition, he's trying to draw Israel in. But Israel's aware of that.
Even if everybody out there knows it.
That's right.
It doesn't mean that it's going to be tidy.
No, I frankly anticipate an Israeli response.
All right. NBC's Martin Fletcher on the telephone once again with us from Tel Aviv. He's now been able to remove his gas mask. Martin, have you been able to call home and check on your family?
Actually, I haven't, Tom, but I'm certainly hoping they're sleeping right through it, because I've got a couple of small children, and as anybody here has found, who's trying to put gas masks on small kids. It's a bit difficult for them to understand why they need to leave it on. It's very tight, it's very hot inside.
Did you do any kind of a rehearsal at home in the last week or so?
Actually, we did, Tom. It seemed a sensible thing to do, because if you suddenly put a gas mask on yourself and then loom in front of an infant wearing this very strange apparatus, you'll never get near him, of course. So we did try and make it into a bit of a game. Of course, the game turned deadly serious now. One thing we're hearing, and the big question, of course, is whether or not Israel will retaliate. I have no information about that beyond the rather obvious information that the Chief of Staff, the Defense Minister, and the General Staff are in the Defense Ministry, and the phrase they're using is they're watching the situation carefully and a rather ominous, maybe a rather ominous phrase, "We're in the right direction," is the phrase that the spokesman used. I'm not really sure what that means.
Yeah. Well, that's a signal to the Israeli people of some kind, I think, isn't it?
I don't know. They do deal in those kind of terms, but I really wouldn't like to say I don't know.
Well, Gary Sick is going to join me in our conversation now, Martin. What's your judgment on that, Gary?
Well, I think another thing that we haven't thought very much about is what if they do it again? If those mobile missiles are out there, it takes them about 2 hours to load up a new missile, get it on board, and fire off again. If those missile sites go unattacked, if they survive for another 2 or 3 hours, we might in fact see another surge of this.
All right. Martin Fletcher, what about that? They can take maybe one attack, but can you imagine Israel taking two?
No way, Tom. No way at all. I really can't imagine that. There's going to be a tremendous call by the people to hit back because, after all, this is one of Israel's bitter enemies. And although there is a great political complication involved in Israel's retaliation because of the American-Arab alliance against Iraq, there's also Israel's own self-interest at stake. And the point that that a certain segment here has been making for weeks is that America and its allies against Iraq are doing a one-time operation. Israel is here for the long term, and any indication that Israel can take punishment without giving it out is, in this part of the world, they feel a death warrant. They really feel the need to retaliate. If they do hold themselves back the first time, I really can't see it happening again.
And Martin Fletcher, give us a kind of a word picture of Tel Aviv tonight. You said people sleeping through the attack. Is that possible? You heard the explosions where you were. There were air raid sirens. There were probably, you said, what, 12 explosions altogether. Some of them may have been secondary. But is it possible that people in Tel Aviv, given the heightened state of tensions there, could be sleeping through it tonight?
Well, Tom, I was actually speaking about my family. It's quite possible my wife slept through it, but I can't imagine the children did. No, I think that very much that with the sirens, with the bangs, and above all, with the telephoning that must be going on, there must be a tremendous amount of communication between families. Are you okay? Are you all right? Every person in the studio here, for instance, has called at least 2 relatives to find out how they are. This is one of those countries where everybody keeps in very tight contact, so I'm sure that the entire nation must now be awake in a sealed room listening to a radio.
Okay, Martin Fletcher, you stand by and see what other information you can get for us. And, of course, the big unanswered question at this hour, and it will remain so until we can get some kind of a response from the Israeli government or the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. Will Israel strike back at Iraq after a missile attack tonight that included at least 1 chemical warhead? It has been identified by the Israelis as nerve gas. Israel, rather Tel Aviv only, not Jerusalem. There were some early indications that perhaps Jerusalem had been hit too, but we do not think that that was the case. It's possible that roads leading to Jerusalem were struck and maybe some missiles exploded in the air. Saddam Hussein, somewhere in a bunker, somewhere in Iraq. What does he do now?
I think he's made his point. He very badly needed to do that because yesterday he frankly looked rather foolish after all of his bluster and talk and the mother of all battles, that almost no plane shot down, his whole air defense system gone out, his planes destroyed on the ground, his missile sites gone, no missiles even in the air. He really didn't live up to his reputation, and that for him has got to be a very potent thing. So I would anticipate that he's taking a certain amount of satisfaction in having done what he said he was going to do. After all, Tariq Aziz said the other day that if attacked, they would absolutely strike Israel. They have now kept that promise. And he must take some satisfaction, and he's going to sit back and wait, too. I wonder what the Israelis, if they're looking at targets and they decide that they're going to do it, what do you do? Almost all the military targets have already been hit, and they're being hit again tonight. What do you do that distinguishes it? The thing is that this was a strike on civilian targets. Do you then go after a civilian neighborhood as an Israeli missile? And if you do that, then you've really got problems.
That's a real provocation in the eyes of the Arab world.
Politically, then, really things have changed. If they retaliate against missile sites, if they retaliate against military targets, I think that, but this wasn't a military strike. Right. This was a strike against civilians. Are they going to retaliate in kind?
Well, they'll probably know from where those missiles were launched, at least. Satellite photography picked up some flashes, we're told. And the question is, do we get to them first, or do the Israelis get to them first?
I assume that we've got things on the way right this minute as we speak, because all they have to do is shift their targeting for, say, a Tomahawk or something, or to divert planes that are already in the air and move them. I don't know how this is done precisely, but we had so much stuff flying around over there that the chance to go over and hit those sites very quickly, it seems to me would be very likely.
We're going to ask your cohort in this enterprise with us the last several nights, Ed Peck, to join us now from Washington. Ed Peck, Saddam Hussein, whatever else we think about him, does not give up easily.
No, sir. He's a man with a great deal of tenacity. He's not a blinker. He's not a quitter.
But as not a quitter, how unreasoning can he be? There seems to be no depth to what he will sink in an effort to get his point across. We know that he has summarily executed anyone he even suspects of being disloyal to him. Just what is his capacity for evil?
I think it's virtually unlimited. When you've been in power for as long as he has, and it's 2 decades now, counting those years when he was at best a nominal number 2 to Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, and swimming in that warm sea of ceaseless and shameless adulation, you begin to lose your psychic distance, and you begin to believe some of the things that are said about you, especially, Tom, if there's no one there to puncture that ego balloon.
All right, Ed, we've got a late report from Dhahran we want to get to you.
Right.
We do have confirmation now that at least one Scud missile from Iraq was fired at Dhahran. It was intercepted by a Patriot missile. That's the anti-missile battery that was put in place, never tested in combat before, but apparently it did work tonight. Dhahran we cannot show you there, but it is right tucked up against Kuwait. Let's get a better map if we can, in which Dhahran is on it. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Dhahran is tucked right up against the Persian Gulf, on fairly close to the Kuwaiti border. It's the large air base. It is where we have been going when we go to our reports from Mike Betcher and Arthur Kent. It is, in fact, where most of the F-15s have been based from the 1st Tactical Fighter Wing out of Langley, Virginia. It's where all of the troops were offloaded when they first arrived, a big distribution point. So there has been confirmation tonight that a Scud missile launched by Iraq, we don't know what kind of a warhead, whether it was chemical or not, but it was intercepted by the Patriot missile. They worked. No one knew for sure whether they would or not. All of the training exercises seemed to indicate that they would, in fact. Now, the belief was that if they were able to intercept and hit a Scud missile that did have a chemical warhead, that the chemical capacity then would be dissipated at a high enough elevation that it would have no effect on the ground. That, too, was theoretical. I talked to the commander of one of those Scud, or one of those Patriot units, when they first were setting up in the desert there just this past fall. And at that time, he was confident about the accuracy, and he could only hope that it would be able to dissipate the chemical capacity. So an attack now has been launched officially by Iraq on Saudi Arabia, specifically on one of the forward American bases, where there are a lot of civilians, including most of the foreign journalists who are based in Saudi Arabia. But the attack was unsuccessful. It was unsuccessful. We had an earlier report that an explosion was heard. We knew that F-15s had been mustered, and Mike Betcher, in fact, said it may have been the launching of a Patriot missile. It turns out that was probably the case. There were air raids warnings that went off. So that's the situation at this hour. Iraq now slowly beginning to strike back, first at Israel, then an attempt that proves to be unsuccessful against Saudi Arabia, the air base at Dhahran intercepted by a Patriot missile. This war is now not going as well as it was, say, 12 hours ago or so. But then, of course, we were forewarned by Defense Secretary Cheney and Colin Powell to expect this. NBC's John Dancy is at the State Department tonight. John, what are they saying there? What are they anticipating there?
Tom, one of the things that the State Department has to do in this, of course, is to try to keep the Arab partners in the coalition. And one of the ways that they hope to do that, of course, is to keep Israel from responding in kind to this attack. I have been in touch with a source at the Israeli embassy here who tells me that as of just a few minutes ago, there had been no Israeli response launched to the attacks on Tel Aviv. The source said that Secretary of State Baker and Deputy Secretary Larry Eagleberger had just been in touch with the ambassador here, Zalman Shoval, to convey their dismay at what had happened. And Secretary Baker said that I am personally devastated by what has happened, and I want you to convey that to the government in Israel. Ambassador Shoval, I am told, told Secretary of State Baker that he would, of course, convey that, but he reiterated Israel's position, which is that if it were attacked, it felt it had the right to respond. But again, there has been no response, according to sources at the Israeli embassy here in Washington. One of the things, Tom, that the United States is most concerned about is what would happen to Syria. When we were on that long trip with Secretary of State Baker last week, where we were in Damascus on Saturday, and the Syrian Foreign Minister, Farouk al-Sharrah, held a press conference along with Baker, he was asked what Syria's response would be, or what Israel ought to do if it were attacked by Iraq. And he said, in our view, Israel ought to just simply sit there and take it, because it would be an attempt on the part of Iraq to shuffle the cards. And by that, he meant to change the political equation and bring the Arab partners in on the side of Iraq. So he said, in Syria's view, Israel ought to simply absorb the attack and not respond.
Nancy, we want to go now to back to Israel, because there are some late developments. The story may have taken another very sharp turn. NBC's Martin Fletcher is there. Martin, we are reading on the wires here that an Israeli radio reporter says no casualties, and you have some additional information?
Yes, Tom. I've just heard from an extremely high military source, a completely reliable source of ours, that there was no chemical attack on Tel Aviv, no nerve gas on Tel Aviv. That, of course, goes in complete contradiction to the reports earlier from the Wolfson Hostel in Tel Aviv that they were accepting victims of nerve gas. But I'm not sure how to juggle that information, but my military source is quite impeccable.
All right, well, we would think that the Israeli military, if no one else, would know what is going on, so that changes the equation again very dramatically here, Martin. Wouldn't they have been able to tell almost instantly with their monitoring devices whether or not it had been a gas attack?
Well, that's what they say they can do, and we've had reports from the police band that they know of nerve gas, reports from the hospital of nerve gas, and now we have a report from this military source, no nerve gas. So I can only say, Tom, it's confusing at the moment, very confusing.
It certainly is, but if in fact this is the accurate report, we can all breathe a little easier, I think, at this hour. A, that there was no nerve gas attack used by Saddam Hussein. It does lower the possibility that the Israelis would then feel compelled to get involved in some way, especially with this Israeli radio report that there may have not been any casualties as a result of those missiles landing there. So, Gary Sick, it takes a little turn for the brighter side, but then we do not want anyone to believe that we are on any kind of a certain course here.
Absolutely not. And the other thing that we've learned about this is that their missiles are just as bad as we thought they were. And the spread of these missiles sort of up and down the Israeli coast, which is a terrible thing. I mean, it's like the V-2 in World War II. You sent them up in a general direction that you never really knew where they were going to come down. And I think that's what happened here.
You've been in the crisis room of the White House during, you were there during the Iranian hostage-taking. It's very tough to engage in any kind of rational decision-making when this kind of thing is going on. Here we have the most sophisticated of the Israeli cities, a missile attack into the middle of it, and for almost 2 hours we're led to believe that it might have been a nerve gas attack of some kind. It changes the equation wildly. There's the possibility of jets being scrambled, somebody doing something that we wouldn't want them to do. How do you make a decision?
It's one of the things that it really does, it requires people to be cool and not to jump at the first piece of information. This is what they refer to as the fog of war. It blurs your vision. You get bits and pieces of information which sound dramatic, and then it changes, and then something that you didn't pay much attention to later on turns out to have been even more important. And it's that sorting out process that I guess the main thing is that if you react to every little piece of information that comes in at you, you spend all of your time sort of chasing your tail, running in circles, rather than focusing on the main line. And in this case, the main line is pretty simple. Those additional Scud launchers are there. They have been used. You don't want them to be used again. You go after them. And if I were the president and I were the national security advisor advising the president, I would say, let's focus on that. Let's talk to the Israelis about that. Let's go get the culprits and finish off the job.
All right, Gary Sick, we appreciate that perspective because I think it's very important. We're going to continue with our coverage of America at War, Operation Desert Storm, right after this.
What I know is these people are alive inside.
Awakenings.
Dr. Thayer, it's a miracle.
Where are my glasses?
They're on your face.
Golden Globe nominee, Best Actor Robin Williams.
You thought what you'd like to do today? Everything.
Robert De Niro, winner, Best Actor, New York Film Critics. Gene Shalit calls it a stunning motion picture.
People have forgotten what life is all about.
And Joel Siegel says it's a movie you have to see. Robert De Niro, Robin Williams, Awakenings, rated PG-13. Now playing in a theater near you. Check newspapers for locations.
If after test driving a Sterling, you find another car with all of its standard features and appointments for $28,500 or less, we'll do more than congratulate you. We'll buy it for you.
3 hours, 9 minutes. May I ask what you're doing? Timing tiny time pills. Excuse me? Well, this morning when I woke up, I thought like this and like that, so I took a Contact. So? Well, Contact has 600 tiny time pills that last 12 hours, up to 3 times longer than ordinary cold medicine. There's a whole day's work in every Contact. 8 hours and 30 seconds. Look, if you're gonna time the tiny time pills all day, when are you gonna do the work? Right. You time it.
There's a whole day's work in every Contact.
I've really got to get some Z's.
Introducing single-dose maximum strength Nitol. Just one will help you fall fast asleep fast. New maximum strength Nitol. Just one Nitol will help you get a lot of Z's.
A little cheddar makes a plain potato scrumptious, but without the cheddar cheese.
No thanks.
So add a little cheddar cheese.
Oh, thank you.
And add a lot of taste. Cheese makes all the difference.
Good evening once again. We live in an uncertain and very dangerous world that could never be more clear than it is tonight. Here is what is going on in the Middle East. Iraq has launched a missile attack on Israel. At least 5, perhaps as many as 6 Scud missiles, it is believed, landed in Tel Aviv. For about an hour and a half, we were led to believe that they contained a nerve gas warhead. At least one of the missiles did. And the Israeli citizens and others in that city were told to put on their gas masks. They did. Great fear. And there were reports of some casualties. Within the last 10 minutes or so, NBC's Martin Fletcher has been told by an extremely high Israeli military source that no nerve gas was in fact contained in any of the warheads, that it was a conventional missile attack. That does not make Saddam Hussein any better as an adversary, but in fact it does probably lower the possibility that Israel will then counter with some kind of an attack of its own against Iraq. There had always been a belief that Saddam Hussein would try to lure Israel into this widening war so that he could break up the Arab alliance with the United States. Conversations have been going on between the White House and top Israeli officials, perhaps even as far as Jerusalem, between Yitzhak Shamir, Prime Minister of that country, and President George Bush. At the same time, Operation Desert Storm continues. There have been sorties off the base at Dhahran in Saudi Arabia, and in fact, a Patriot missile from the United States did intercept a Scud missile that was launched at the U.S. base at Dhahran. It is now effectively a U.S. base there, and it was a successful intercept. We have heard nothing from Baghdad itself for the past 12 hours or so. It is coming up on 5:30 in the morning there, and the bombing raids do continue against military targets both in Kuwait and in Baghdad. So that's the situation at this hour. We do know that Israel has been attacked. The magnitude of attack we cannot confirm for you at this hour. Whether it contained chemical weapons, that too cannot be confirmed, although the last, most reliable information that we were able to get through Martin Fletcher was that in fact there was no chemical attack. So that makes us all breathe a little easier, not only here, but of course in Israel and throughout the Middle East tonight as well. A Scud missile launched at Dhahran, intercepted by an American Patriot missile. It was an unsuccessful attack on Dhahran. Fred, if there were in fact no chemicals in the warhead, this turns out to be a fairly feeble Iraqi effort. One missile launched at Dhahran, only 5 or 6 at Tel Aviv, no chemicals involved.
Well, first of all, we have never confirmed, U.S. intelligence has never confirmed, in fact, Israeli intelligence has never confirmed that the Iraqis developed the ability to deliver a chemical warhead on those Scud missiles. It was assumed that in the last 6 months there was a major hurry-up program in Iraq to have that chemical capability. But no U.S. intelligence agency nor any foreign intelligence agency ever confirmed that. However, once a man has that many missiles and such a large chemical industry, for defensive purposes, it makes good sense to protect yourself against them. The mobile missile, that is what the Pentagon is still going after. We heard it from Defense Secretary Cheney today. We heard it from the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Colin Powell, that they did not get all the mobile missiles. There are approximately 75 mobile missile launchers scattered all the way from southwestern Iraq, all the way across the border, down into Dhahran. Now, if this report is correct, and we certainly believe it to be correct, that a Scud missile was fired at Dhahran, we have just been told now by our bureau in Dhahran that in the shelters, some of the American military personnel are putting on their gas suits based on that report. So if all of that is true, then slowly but surely the United States will be able to get these mobile missiles. It's not so much the missile, Tom, it's a launcher. And each launcher may have 5, 10, 15 missiles attached to that launcher. But once it is fired, U.S. has satellite imagery that fixes its location. And sorties can be launched from those air bases to strike those missiles, to strike those launchers. So if they fired five from launchers in the western desert towards Tel Aviv, and they fired one south into Dhahran, we know at least where 6 of those launchers are. And where there is one launcher, there are others, because the Iraqi government has a limited number of control vans for each launcher. They have perhaps one control van for 5 separate launchers. So they cannot be scattered entirely all over the western desert, and they can't be scattered, Tom, all over the southern desert. They have to be in collected locations. And we just heard from a senior Pentagon official that the tempo of the attacks against Iraq tonight have not increased because of this, except in one situation where they're going after these mobile missile launchers. Tom?
Fred, have the Defense Department officials ever been in touch with their counterparts in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, about whether or not it contained any chemical warheads?
I do not know that, Tom. Since this war is being fought from Riyadh and fought from Dhahran, there's not a great deal of activity at the Pentagon. They're getting reports in here, and that is something that's handled on a political level, because it is a political decision, not just for this country on how it pressures or talks to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, but it's handled on a political level on what Jerusalem decides to do to get into this fray. I will say that it is the opinion of experts that we have talked to here at the Pentagon that if it is just an explosive warhead, it makes a great deal of difference than a gas warhead. Right. And it's very significant for Israel.
Absolutely. We do not even have to spell out the term Holocaust to remind you of why that has such grave meanings for the Israelis. Well, we've been through some pretty wild swings here so far this evening. It's hard to believe that I could be saying to you that it's looking a little better, because it turns out that there was just a missile attack on Tel Aviv. And that's the kind of world in which we live. We had been led to believe earlier by everyone in Tel Aviv that maybe they had been the target of a nerve gas attack. We do now believe that, in fact, no nerve gas was involved, no chemical weapons whatsoever. 5 or 6 missiles, however, did hit that city tonight. One building was collapsed. How many casualties? We cannot say. NBC's Martin Fletcher is still on the telephone with us. He's been in and out of his gas mask all night long based on warnings from Israeli officials. He is now out of it again. And Martin, what do you have for us?
Well, Tom, we're getting to the heart of the matter in terms of Israel's retaliation, as you suggested, and Fred Francis too. In fact, all of your consultants, I think the extent of the damage here could well determine the extent of whether indeed Israel retaliates at all. So now I think we're getting to the bottom of it. We've been in touch with 2 of the hospitals. There are a few what they call slightly wounded in one of the hospitals. They're all wounded slightly from glass concussion, nothing serious. But the emergency room is crowded, and the hospital says they're all psychosomatic cases, people who, because of the government warnings about gas war, because the government told them to put on gas masks, complained of gas symptoms. That's why the original scare began, I guess, because the hospital then answered questioners by saying, yes, we have victims of nerve gas in our hospital.
But in fact, it's only psychosomatic in their minds only at this point.
That's what the hospital told us right now, yes.
Okay, NBC's Martin Fletcher, that is reassuring indeed to know here tonight. We just want to keep everyone posted. There has been a missile attack on Tel Aviv, maybe even some missiles in the north of Israel as well. Nothing on Jerusalem, probably launched from mobile launchers in the western desert of Iraq. One missile went after Tehran. That's the big air base there. It was intercepted by a Patriot missile, and the Patriot missile was able to shoot it down before it landed or did any damage. So far, for all of his bluster, Saddam Hussein is a man without a lot of military resources.
I think the only thing that came as a surprise about the missile attack was that it came tonight instead of last night. I think most of us anticipated that as soon as an attack was launched, that would be the very first thing that Saddam would do, is fire off missiles toward Israel. And it was quite reassuring after the first 12, 24 hours went by that he hadn't done that. And I think we all began to breathe a sigh of relief, a little bit prematurely, as it turns out. If these missile launchers that he's now used get knocked out, and he can't repeat it, and he can't do another round, this was a minor event overall. No nerve gas, relatively small number, no real damage, no casualties, poor performance by the missiles, and if those get knocked out, it is a small blip in the radar screen.
And as the President of the United States, you may be able to persuade Yitzhak Shamir just to hold tight here for a while.
At least for the moment.
Let us take care of it, and if we're not successful, or if you take another attack, then it's a different proposition altogether. Would Shamir listen to that?
I should think he would. Actually, Shamir has been very good thus far, and the Israelis have been extremely disciplined about this. This is a war that's very close to them. It's something that concerns them. It's a deadly enemy of theirs. And they have stayed out of it. They've laid low. They've kept a low profile. It's very tough to imagine that they would do nothing. Obviously, they have their own population to think about and their own public opinion.
Well, they also have some long-term impact to think about. I mean, once this war is over, then the whole attention is going to focus on the Palestinian question. That will not go away, even if the United States is absolutely successful within a matter of a few days.
That's going to be the next round. The next big questions are, what happens in Iraq post-attack? Do we still have a Saddam Hussein there, very badly weakened? Don't we have a Saddam Hussein there? Are the neighbors, Turkey and the others, beginning to look into the country? But the other big question, of course, is beyond Iraq and what happens there is what happens with the Israeli issue and the Arab-Israel question. And those are questions which you really can't answer at this point simply because you don't know what's going to happen next. And we've seen a wonderful example, not a wonderful, a dramatic example of that this evening with this sudden new eventuality that we really hadn't counted on.
When you say next, we don't know in the next 30 seconds. We're not talking about tomorrow or next week or next year sometime. I mean, what is going on there? And anytime you have a war, these are the conditions of war. It is called the fog of combat, and that applies to the politics of war as well. Well, it is coming up now on about 5:33 in the Persian Gulf, in Iraq, and in Kuwait. We believe that attacks still are underway. They'll have a better assessment once daylight begins to hit that part of the world, because they'll have those high-flying reconnaissance satellites going over, taking high-resolution pictures, which are then fed into a computer, and they can look at an object down to 6 inches from great heights. They can see a license plate, but maybe not always read the numbers. At any rate, they'll get a pretty good idea of what damage has been done so far, and the ability then of Saddam Hussein to launch some kind of a counterattack. Nothing on the ground that we know about so far. No tanks have rolled. Only a total maybe of 8 or 9 missiles have been launched by him. So for all of his bluster and his wide array of uniforms, he has not launched much of a counterstrike. But that does not suggest that we ought to be sanguine about the prospects for an immediate and soon a quick success there, because we do not know what he is likely to do next. This is a desperate man, and he has used desperate tactics in the past against even his own people. When it comes to ruthless, he wrote the original book. That's the situation at this hour. NBC's Martin Fletcher, are you still on the telephone or not?
Yes, I am, Tom.
Okay. What's the latest there? Are they breathing much easier in Israel tonight?
Well, I can't tell because I think they're all breathing very heavily. Everybody is still in their still in their sealed rooms. The message to leave those has not yet come. We can use one figure now, which is quoting Israel Radio. They say in the entire country, only 7 slightly wounded from all these missiles, which is a pretty startling example of how frightening as the sound of the missiles is. The extent of the damage is not always so great.
Well, it's the extraordinary thing about warfare, Martin, and you've seen a good deal of it in your time. For all of the sound and fury, there can be occasions, as we saw in Beirut, in a very closed city, which there can be bombings and bombings and bombings, and then people can come from their cellars and come from their secure places and survive. Here tonight, you have in the middle of the night a surprise missile attack and only 7 slight casualties. Now, the other side of that coin is that war can be horrendous very swiftly as well. Agreed?
That's right, and it's quite interesting because of all countries in the world, Israel has to be one of the one of the best prepared for this kind of war. And yet, the advice from the government and from the army was quickly go high in the building, get into that sealed room against gas warfare. When in fact, it turned out to be conventional weapons, and being high in the building is the worst thing you can possibly do. The thing to do is to get low into the bunker.
All right, Martin Fletcher, we want to go just south of there, down to Cairo, where NBC's Robin Lloyd is standing by right now, where he has some information for us, I'm told, on the role of the Egyptians so far in Operation Desert Storm. Robin?
Hi, Tom. It's obviously still pre-dawn hours here, so there's no reaction from the government at this point. Nothing on Cairo TV at this point that would indicate what their reaction would be. But I think, given what you're telling me and what I'm hearing, that only 7 wounded, that kind of situation I don't think is going to create that much of a problem for the Egyptians. President Hosni Mubarak has always said that Israel has a right to defend itself. It's not exactly clear what Egypt means by that, but certainly I think the Egyptians were willing to accept even some kind of counterattack by the Israelis commensurate with whatever the Israelis received. Obviously, that's something they wanted to avoid. They want to keep the Israelis out of it as much as possible, but I think they were prepared for that.
All right, Robin Lloyd, what are we hearing about the role of the Egyptians so far in the military operation itself? They had primarily ground troops up there. Are you getting any official or unofficial indication of how active the Egyptians have been at this point?
Well, the Egyptians are sitting about, I believe, 70 kilometers away from the Saudi-Kuwait border. They have about 35,000 troops in the desert. And I believe it's not exactly clear what kind of role they would play. Mubarak has said publicly in a magazine interview that he will not go into Iraq, but he wants to participate in the liberation of Kuwait. So it implies that the Egyptians, in principle, may be willing to do some fighting. It's not clear exactly whether they'll be in the first wave or exactly what their role will be.
Martin Fletcher, what kind of attention is Operation Desert Storm getting on Egyptian radio and in the newspapers there?
In Israel, Tom, of course.
Martin Fletcher. I'm sorry. I was going to Robin Lloyd and I said Martin Fletcher. I wanted to ask Robin Lloyd in Cairo. We'll come back to you in a moment, Martin. Robin, can you tell us about what's going on in Egypt and the attention that it's getting in the Egyptian press and on radio?
Well, I think the Egyptian people are behind what Mubarak is doing, and they're behind the whole operation. Most feel that Saddam Hussein was wrong, and they feel that something should be done to correct that. So Mubarak, if you talk to professors at the Cairo University here, Mubarak may have as much as 85% of the people behind him. Of course, what concerns the Egyptians, the authorities, is if Israel did get involved in some kind of major way, particularly in a way that would seem to be not commensurate with some kind of attack that Israel received, then it might be politically more difficult for the Egyptian government to continue in the alliance in the same way. That's their big concern. But I think given the fact of what you've told me so far, the Egyptians may not want to talk about this when they wake up this morning. But I don't see it as embarrassing a situation as their worst case nightmare.
All right, thanks very much, Robin Lloyd in Egypt. Gary Sick, who has been following all of this, as he has with us for the past several nights. We're in kind of a holding pattern at the moment, Gary.
It might be worth reminding people that the central danger about an Israeli attack is, first of all, the political side, that they will be perceived as having joined the war. The other thing is that in order to get to Iraq from Israel, just sheer geography, there's only two likely ways you can do it, and that is to go directly across Jordan, whether with a missile or with aircraft. And the other is what they did when they hit the nuclear reactor, and that is to swing south through Saudi Arabia, Saudi airspace, and come in that direction. Again, given the circumstances we have now, they would have to coordinate that, obviously, with the AWACS and all the other things that are going on. But whatever they do, whatever move they make, is going to create political ripples that are going to have a tremendous impact.
We want to go back to Tel Aviv, where we have NBC's Martin Fletcher off the telephone and back on camera for us now. Martin, are you there?
Yes, I am, Tom.
Okay, you can leave your glasses on. That's all right. We've seen you in a gas mask. We can see you in glasses.
They're a strange color, Tom.
Martin, the chances now, it seems to me, have diminished considerably. I was one of those who believed that if there had been a missile attack with severe casualties and nerve gas involved, that the Israelis would have to strike back. We've now had those reports modified a great deal. Light casualties, no nerve gas, only 5 or 6 missiles. Do you think that Shamir will sit tight?
I think Israel will be sorely tempted to attack, and I think Israel may well bend to American pressure and advice to sit tight, because after all, Israel, as I said earlier in the program, Israel is so well aware of what the dangers of an Israeli retaliation are, and because the injuries were so low, because chemical weapons were not used, I think it falls into that grey area where it depends on how many missiles were fired, how much damage there is, how many dead. It appears there are no dead and only 7 slightly wounded. I think there's a good chance Israel will not retaliate, it's my bet.
There is no more vigorous politics in the world than in the country from which you report, Israel, of course. Has there been a kind of solidarity about Israel being patient and standing firm during all of this, Martin?
Well, yeah, I think so, Tom. The country really is united. There was, for a start, there was the most tremendous outpouring of praise and joy at the apparent American success in the first hours of the war. The entire nation is certainly behind the concept that war with Iraq is necessary now. The Prime Minister has been very careful to bring into all of his discussions the opposition. So I think I would say certainly that this is one of those rare times when Israel is united.
Martin, what was going on in the West Bank today, where the Palestinians live, when the first reports began to come in of Operation Desert Storm?
Well, it was a curfew immediately, Tom, so it's another one of those occasions where the relationship between Israel and Palestinians dictates that the occupying troops keep the Palestinians in their homes, because, as you know, the timing was such that the 3 Palestinians, the 3 PLO members who were killed, assassinated in Tunisia, was about to provoke the most violent backlash in the occupied territories. So, in fact, they were under curfew when it happened, and that prevented any outpouring of rage by the Palestinians, because the Israelis immediately told the Palestinians that now that there's war, the rules of war apply in the occupied territories. That means no more sticks and stones, but shoot to kill if necessary, Tom.
All right, thanks, Martin Fletcher. We want to go to the White House now. NBC's John Cochran is there. President Bush now has issued a statement about this Iraqi missile attack on Israel. John, what do you have to say?
All right, I'll just read it to you. This is a statement from the President's press secretary. The Department of Defense has confirmed the firing of missiles from Iraq into Israel and Saudi Arabia. Damage assessments are being made. President Bush was informed of this action by National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft earlier this evening. The President has also discussed the matter with Secretary of State Baker and Secretary of Defense Cheney. The President is outraged at and condemns this further aggression by Iraq. Coalition forces in the Gulf are attacking missile sites and other targets in Iraq. Now, he says coalition forces. He doesn't just say United States forces. I will have to ask Fred Francis this. I would assume that would mean the British. I don't know anybody else who would be attacking with jets at this hour, Tom, or during these early days. And now there has been great concern here, as you've been talking about all evening, about what the Israelis would do. They're very concerned about Jordan right now. They were here at the White House. They were very disturbed by the fact that the Jordanian government today strongly condemned the United States for attacking Iraq. They expected something a little milder than that from King Hussein. They believe that King Hussein is very shaky there, and that he has to condemned the United States in order to play to the Palestinians in his country. Of course, the Palestinians form the majority of the population in Jordan. So it's going to be very interesting now, and the White House will be monitoring very closely what happens in Jordan in terms of street demonstrations. Of course, this is also true elsewhere throughout the Arab world. You were talking to Robin Lloyd. It's true in Cairo and other places, particularly those countries Arab countries which have supplied military forces into the Gulf area, Tom.
John Cochran, let's go to Martin Fletcher now in Tel Aviv and talk for just a moment about King Hussein of Jordan. This has probably been the worst period of what has been a long, long reign for him of just barely surviving, but I can't remember a greater ordeal than he has been put through or put himself through in the last 5 months or so. Can he possibly survive, Martin, politically?
I think, knowing King Hussein, he probably will survive, Tom, despite the amazing obstacles he's faced with. I would just put forward that in 1970, when he went to war with the Palestinians, a terribly bitter, intense civil war with the Palestinians, I was there. That probably was even more dangerous for him than today, because now here we have the potential of civil war in Jordan, the Islamic fundamentalists, the Palestinians, the pressures from Iraq.
Whoops, we lost the satellite. Well, that's how it happens. We don't always have control over it. The transmission just goes down, or it gets switched to someone else who wants to transmit it at that time. We have what we call paths, and we always hope that we own our own path, but sometimes we only own it for a certain amount of time. And now you've heard the entire extent of my knowledge about how satellite transmission works. We'll be back with more on Operation Desert Storm after this.
From Walt Disney Pictures, an innocent young man.
Looking for somebody to take me to my father's claim.
And a seasoned guide.
You wouldn't last a day out here. What makes you the expert? Experience.
Together, they will face the dangers of the wild.
Watch out!
Discover a fortune.
It's just like we dreamed of.
And forge a lasting friendship.
Your father would be proud of you.
Jack London's classic, White Fang, rated PG, starts tomorrow at a theater near you.
To celebrate 30 years of 30-minute delivery, Domino's Pizza delivers the Big 3-0. Order a large pizza at regular price and get a medium with your favorite topping for just 30 cents more. A great deal like this won't last forever, so call now and ask for the Big 3-0.
The Big 3-0. It's time for Domino's Pizza Big 3-0.
This is the sound of Unisom, the sound of sleep. With Unisom, you hit your pillow and fall asleep fast. Tonight, you can sleep more soundly with Unisom, America's #1 sleep aid.
Bengay welcomes back all the people who tried one of those other pain relievers, but found that for them, nothing works better than Bengay. It warms away pain with 2 pain relievers, not just 1. Welcome back to Bengay, America's best-selling pain relief rub.
Why do I enjoy healthier Alpine Lace, low cholesterol and low sodium Swiss low cheese? Because it tastes so good. And now it's even lower in fat.
The healthy and tasty Swiss low cheese tastes so good. Alpine Lace.
They destroyed everything he had, everything he was. Now crime has a new enemy, and justice has a new face. Who is Darkman? Find out February 14th at your local video store.
Coming up on 12 minutes before 10 Eastern Standard Time here in the United States, and 10 minutes to 6 almost in Iraq and in Saudi Arabia. To give you a quick fix on where we stand at this hour, a Scud missile was fired at that large complex in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. It was intercepted by a United States Patriot missile, just one missile. Several missiles were fired into Tel Aviv tonight. There were early reports that one of the warheads contained chemical capacity. It did not. We had one report that it was nerve gas. No chemical weapons whatsoever involved, we have been assured now by Israeli officials, although Israeli citizens were told on 2 occasions to don their gas mask, and they did. It does seem that casualties have been light, just some light wounded, primarily from shattered glass and so on. So the big question still remains, will the Israelis respond now to Iraq? Iraq would like to drag them into this in hopes that they could break up the Arab alliance. on the satellite with us once again is NBC's Martin Fletcher, who has been there all night long. Martin, no additional word, I gather, from the Israeli government about whether they will have an attack, and of course we wouldn't know until they'd already hit something, right?
I'm afraid that hasn't changed, Tom. Yes, there's no sign of Israeli retaliation that we can see here or any of our sources. And as you say, we wouldn't know, but we know the country is prepared for it. We just have to wait and see what happens.
How closely were they following that, not just in the government, but what has been going on in the last 24 hours or 48 hours? I know that you know that in this country it has been virtually around the clock, that this country has been riveted by what has been going on. What about in Israel, where they live so close to the action and are in such peril?
Well, you know, Tom, it's been...
Well, it doesn't always work out the way that we hope that it might, but those are our own perils. They're considerably less than the perils that the people face in the Middle East. NBC's Fred Francis at the Pentagon with the latest for us from there. Fred?
Tom, we are told by Pentagon officials and other administration sources that more than one Scud missile was launched into Saudi Arabia. More than one. I do not have an exact number that is imprecise right now, but we are told by senior officials that the attack that took place on Israel, where more than 5 were launched, that more than one was launched into the Dhahran area. Now, we know that the one that was launched into Dhahran from southern Iraq was shot down by a Patriot missile. That was indeed a fortuitous shoot down because, in fact, the Patriot missile has never been tested in combat. It has never been combat tested. It has only been tested. It has only been tested in the western deserts against a Lance missile. You see it there, the Patriot missile going up to shoot down an incoming Lance missile.
Yeah, this is file test film.
That's file tape from the Pentagon showing how the Patriot missile system works, but there was not a high degree of confidence that it would work on incoming Scuds. There's almost no warning time. The distance between southern Iraq and Kuwait to the air base in Dhahran is just a few hundred miles, as you well know, and a missile moving this fast only takes a few minutes, 5 minutes, to get on target. And while the target is not precise, it moves so fast, so the Patriot missile system has a computer that locks its radar onto the target, and then the computer fires the missile. We do not know what happened to the other incoming Scud missiles into Saudi Arabia. We don't know whether they fell short into the desert or whether they too were shot down. We will also tell you that the Israelis have been setting up in the last couple of days Patriot missile systems given to the Israeli government by the United States to put in their northern regions, but we do not yet know if those Patriot systems are operating. So the United States has not, Tom, increased its tempo of operations except to go after the locations where these missiles were launched. And we do not have any feedback whether they were successful or not. But there's been no increase in tempo of operations. And also there's only guesswork at the Pentagon and other places in government whether the Israelis will respond. We were told earlier to expect an Israeli response, and no one has taken us away from that as yet. Tom?
Right. Yeah, a couple of questions, Fred.
Sure.
Do the Israelis keep missiles in southern Lebanon in their so-called security zone? And why would we be able to pick up an incoming Scud missile in Dhahran and shoot it down, and the Israelis, with all of their very sophisticated air defense systems, have them land in Tel Aviv?
Well, it is a question of speed, Tom. The Patriot missile system and this particular grade of the Patriot missile system is an upgrade from the Star Wars program. How do you shoot down an incoming missile? And they've practiced it, and it's all a computer lock-on. The Israelis don't have that kind of system. The Israelis can respond with missiles, but they cannot shoot them down. And in fact, the last big budget item for Star Wars went to the Israeli government to develop an Arrow missile that will shoot precisely this kind of missile down, but they are years away from developing that, and at least 5 years away from developing that. So it's imprecise. No one in this government had great confidence in the Patriot system, but it worked tonight.
Sure did. Fred Francis, thank you very much. We'll ask you to stand by as we go now to Capitol Hill. NBC's Andrea Mitchell is there with a congressman who is an influential voice in foreign policy and has very strong feelings about what is going on in the Middle East, particularly as it applies to Israel. Andrea?
Exactly right, Tom. Congressman Steve Solar is a Democrat from New York who led the coalition that produced a successful vote for George Bush, the resolution authorizing him to use force. Tonight, obviously, we've heard conflicting reports, but now it appears that there was not chemical weapons. Would you expect, though, that this has crossed the threshold and that Israel would be retaliating?
I do, Andrea. I think the Iraqi attack against Israel was to be expected. And I think an Israeli retaliation against Iraq is to be expected. I also believe that we should expect the coalition will hold together. Both Saudi Arabia and Egypt recognize that they face a far more serious threat from Iraq than from Israel, and they're much more concerned about Saddam than about Shamir. In the case of Syria, the Syrians were not in any case participating in the air campaign, and it was always questionable whether they would participate in a ground campaign if there is even a need for one. So I don't think that this will result in the unraveling of the coalition.
Just to make the argument that some people in the Bush administration might be making, is there any way that you think Israel would be persuaded not to retaliate if these were conventional weapons and if the loss of life were minimum?
Israel permitted itself to be persuaded
just a quick
not to launch a preemptive attack against Iraq. I do not believe they can reasonably be expected not to strike back after having been attacked in population centers by Iraqi missiles.
Okay. Thank you, Congressman Solar's Tom.
Thanks very much. NBC News has learned that 6 Scud missiles either are heading for or have been launched at Saudi Arabia from Iraq. We do not know any additional information. NBC's Mike Betcher is at Dhahran right now. Mike, any more air raid sirens there?
Nothing, Tom. It's quiet. There has been very little activity on the air base here. It's interesting. I think that the alarm system lags behind the actual launch of missiles, if indeed they are occurring. Today, when we heard that, or this evening, when we heard the bang, the alarm came on, about 5 minutes after. So we're trying to get confirmation on the ground here, but we can't reach anyone to do that at the present time. So it is all quiet here. There have been no alarms, and we'll stand by, Tom, until we feel that we should head down to the basement.
All right, Mike Betcher, we are told that our source for this are high-ranking coalition officials. That's as precise as we can be. They have been highly reliable in the past, and we are told that either 6 Scud missiles are heading for Saudi Arabia or have already hit in Saudi Arabia, as I understand it. Let me just see if I can pick up something here on my computer. That's what we've been told. We do know that one missile that was launched at Dhahran was shot down by a Patriot missile, which is based there. The Patriot missiles were the anti-missile missiles. They had not been used, as Fred Francis pointed out, in combat before, and they were among the first units that were put in place because there were very grave fears early on when the United States first put Desert Shield in place that maybe there would be a preemptive strike from Saddam Hussein, and especially that there might be a chemical weapon of some kind or another. Gary Sick, as you look at the play of forces here tonight, it's pretty fluid at the moment. What can we anticipate next?
Well,
Steve Solar says that they're going to attack, by the way.
We talked several hours ago that it would take 2 or 3 hours for another flight of missiles to come out, and now what we're seeing is 3 hours later, almost exactly, another flight of missiles. So I don't know whether that really means anything or not, but it suggests that this is an ongoing thing and that those missile sites, wherever they were not silenced the first time around, but are now beginning to make themselves felt once more. So we may be in for a siege. My guess would be that this is kind of a guerrilla warfare as compared to the major warfare that we had anticipated. It's not 75 missiles coming in. It's a handful here and there. It's Iraq fighting in a highly wounded state. Iraq has been crippled, very badly crippled, and I think what they're doing, these are little spasms that we're getting from them, and presumably that's going to go on for some time.
It is not what you would call a very substantial counterattack, if that's what it is. 6 at Tel Aviv, 6 or 7 at Saudi Arabia. I mean, for the people who are in the path of those missiles, it's terrible peril, but in the larger scheme of things, it is not.
No, it's symbolic, and it's basically to make Saddam's point that he is not going to go down without a fight, but in fact it's a pitiful example. I mean, he fired more missiles than that against Tehran every hour on the hour for weeks on end. So this is a very, very minor thing in light of what he had to operate with.
We're still awaiting any kind of an official assessment of the damage that has been done so far. Alexander Bezmirnik, who is the new Soviet foreign minister, said tonight that the presidential palace in Baghdad was destroyed. We had been told that the chemical capacity had been knocked out, and that may in fact turn out to be true because they were not able to get any chemical weapons into Tel Aviv despite earlier reports.
Well, you know, the chemical thing, as somebody mentioned earlier, the fact that Saddam Hussein has chemicals and warheads does not mean that he has chemical warheads. And it has never been proved, and I was very interested to hear Fred say that earlier, that it never has been absolutely established. This would have been the first confirmation that they've managed to do all of the fusing, the complex work that has to be done to put that in a warhead.
Gary Sick, we're going to ask you to stay in place and all of our correspondents around the world as we continue our coverage of America at War, Operation Desert Storm. We'll be back right after this.
The liberation of Kuwait has begun.
I'm hopeful that this fighting will not go on for long.
We are in the very early stages of this operation.
Here it comes now, Tom. There's a very big bang right out the western side of the city. And now guns, there you go. You can hear that, Tom. There are guns and there's more explosions on the western edge of the city. There's red tracer, white tracer. It's going up all over the place.
Sirens are still going. Let's listen. As many of you folks as you can should head to the shelter now.
Mike, get Arthur Kent to run up to the Joint Information Bureau. Get Arthur Kent to find out. We just lost Saudi Arabia. That's not an encouraging sign.
On the first wave that went up to Baghdad area last night, took off at 1:30. When he blew up, I could see